In the old world of Warhammer, Albion is an island that sits in the Great Ocean, west of the big powers like the Empire, Bretonnia, and the Norscan tribes. It is a desolate, windswept place, littered with bogs and plagued by rain. And if any of that is sounding familiar, then yes, of course, it is the old world's United Kingdom. Now, what would one of these hapless inhabitants do if they heard rumours of a place where their love of the earth and nature was shared, but where they were protected from the predations of chaos and things were a bit less drizzly? This place, they hear, is a giant, ancient forest known as Athel, Loren, and to get there, they're going to have to cross the Kingdom of Bretonnia. And so at some undignified hour in the morning, Kiwi and I rocked up at the port, ready to make the dangerous crossing across the Straits of Albion and down the coast a little to land in Bretonnia. Once on board, I found a seat and treated myself to the last bit of Albion or British cuisine for the next fortnight, which came replete with some kind of unidentifiable grease mulch. I then settled in for some serious research on the travels ahead.
Drive the right.
Miraculously, I did remember for the most part to drive on the right. This was my first time on holiday abroad in nearly 10 years, and it was also Battle Camper's first time beyond the sea. And what's a man freshly abroad in a beautiful city, in a beautiful country, with a beautiful culture to do? Well, first things first, I needed to shop for the essentials. Stocked up on bread, paints and glue, we were back on the road and travelling through France's infinite supply of quaint villages. Because of their hefty tolls on some of the main roads, we were taking the back routes all the way across this pretty chunky country.
Another break, another issue, Kiwi.
Yes, it seems we can't go a single holiday without Kiwi rolling in cow poo.
Smell, you actually just wouldn't believe it.
Only 40 minutes to go to the first stop. The problem is every 10 minutes I fluctuate between really wanting to power through and get there and just wanting to find the first lay-by I possibly can to crawl up into. I'm currently on a let's power through tip. I'm at the peak now, I'm at the peak, expecting the trough any moment.
I did power through, and around 20 hours after I set off that morning, I arrived in a little wooded area around 360 miles south of Calais. Being a land of knights, Bretonnia is also the land of castles. Like the phones and cars of our world, castles are of course marvels of engineering that were born out of necessity, but grew to become as much about status as they were about function. I'd camped out a mere stone's throw from one of these Middle Ages Lamborghinis. So when it became apparent that some kind of weird hog hunt had begun in the woods in which I was camping, I took my cue to leave and head over to the castle. I was properly jammed in this awful, sticky, gunky mud that had just glued the wheel in place. But like the effective and practical woodsman I am, I decided to try and dig the mud away with a stick. You can see just how thick and difficult it is to shift. So I lay the sticks instead to get some purchase behind the wheel. When that predictably didn't work, some very kind locals said they'd use a rope to try and drag the van out. I wasn't full of confidence given that it was more string than it was rope. Yeah, that popping sound was the rope immediately breaking. So we went for a slightly less subtle approach.
Yeah! Jesus Christ. Oh, what a start to the day.
How ironic. 600 years after the Battle of Agincourt, it was the British stuck in the mud and the French that took the day. Anyway, newly freed, I made the short hop over to Chateau de Chenonceau. I plan to get started on my painting project for the week. It's time at last to go through the project for this week. There are 10 Dryads, 26 Glade Guard, 18 Eternal Guard. I've then got an Eagle, I've got a Tree Lord Ancient, I've got a Battle Standard Bearer, and I have a Glade Lord. It is a lot. So, with elves to paint and a fantasy nation to discover, I headed into the chateau's grounds. This chateau was built in the 16th century. It is a manor house more than it is a fortification, and shows that just like their Bretonnian counterparts, French nobility would use their wealth as status as well as defence. Like any good Bretonnian fort, it has a storied history. It is built on the site of an original chateau that was burned down in vengeance for the occupants' alleged sedition. It was the site of France's first ever fireworks display, and in World War II, since the river formed the edge of Nazi-occupied France, it was a means of escape into the south. So, you might be wondering, why am I talking about Bretonnia if I'm painting Wood Elves? Well, there's 2 points to make actually. The first is that, like any man of the old world from Albion who wants to travel to Lothlorien, Athel Loren, it's an important and copyrightable difference there, they'd have to go through Bretonnia, or France in my case. The second is, and this is perhaps a more creatively appealing reason, the two histories are inextricably linked. There's a school of thought that suggests you can't have Bretonnia as it is without Athel Loren and vice versa, and therefore it's important to get a complete picture. The start of this connection is the Lady, or the Lady of the Lake. Ripped straight out of Arthurian legend, in Warhammer she is the patron deity of Bretonnia. However, she is also Liliath, the elven goddess. Whilst she favours Bretonnia, she also uses it as a shield against chaos, hence why she drives it to be an ever more martial and chivalrous nation. We've arrived at our next stopover, and tonight we take advantage of one of France's greatest traditions, greater still than the constitutional tradition that it's gifted the world. It's the air de service, or air de camping car. Basically, a free campsite. Generally a little bit basic, but it's got toilets, it's got free electricity, just on tap for you to take. No showers, sadly, that's the one drawback, and that's one of the facilities that I really, really need. That night I had to carry on with nothing particularly exciting, just the base coats, browns, greens and flesh colours, to try and get these elves kick-started. The next morning I started like every morning should start, with a trip to the boulangerie. Oh god, I miss fresh croissants for breakfast. With hot air balloons hanging above us, we headed south, leaving behind the luscious green fields of northern France. This was another long 250-mile journey through the wiggly back roads. We were heading for the region of Cantal in southerly central France. Along the way, the temperature improved markedly. This region is hillier and woodier, which suits me down to the ground, and we were heading for Castle Duval, which sits on La Dordogne River. Chateau Duval might look like another one of those French castles that's been built more for beauty than it has for practicality, but actually this is a proper defensive structure that used to stand on a 30-metre high rock overlooking the Dordogne Valley. It wasn't until the 1950s that a dam was constructed which flooded the valley. Since the 14th century, a castle has stood on this spot. I've had this spot picked out for months to visit. Not only is it beautiful in its own right, but it is decidedly Bretonnian. Through its many restorations and build stages, its 6 conical towers are each different, giving it a slightly chaotic, higgledy-piggledy look. This, together with its narrow causeway and unlikely lake location, give it a distinctly fantasy feel. After what might be Kiwi's favourite ever walk, we had to get back down to business. There were elves to paint. Having finished up the base coating, it was time to start layering up that green. Those cloaks were going to be the focal point of the army without doubt. Being Wood Elves, and this being basically Warhammer fantasy, I was going for clean, bold colours. Bright and poppy over realistic. Whilst painting, I was gushing about this magical spot I'd found.
It goes right into my top 5. Straight away, no question. It's contending for the top spot. It's unbelievable. I can't believe how lucky I was to find it.
As good as painting here during the day was, it was every bit as good at night. This is the perfect project for me to have brought on one of these trips. I've started playing Fantasy Warhammer 3 times in my life, and no time did it stick long enough for me to paint a full unit. I've never had a completely painted block of infantry in a movement tray. These armies always seemed so intimidating as projects, and unfortunately I just never got to it before the game was nuked. Now that it's back and there's a lot of community hype, I'm determined to make it work. With this precious determination, I painted long into the night, and I began early again the next day. I blasted through painting the white feathers, the brown wood, and the metals of both silver and gold varieties. And then, with the day warming up to quite an alarming temperature, me and the dog tried to cool off.
I've given up. We're going to go find shade.
We didn't find easy shade or sustenance, so I decided it was time to just continue on the journey. However, we'd hit something of a metaphorical fork in the road, and a literal one as well. You see, if you look at a map of the old world, you might be forgiven for thinking that Athel Loren must be the forests at the foot of the Alps, given they are at the east of Bretonnia, nestled at the foot of the Grey Mountains. But I don't think that's right. See, unlike Bretonnia, France has a second mountain range at the south. It delineates the border with Spain, which in the old world would be Estalia, and it sits just beyond Carcassonne, which has its own Bretonnian namesake. Therefore, I'm heading south to the Pyrenees.
It also feels very Bretonnia. I mean, you can see the fields down here. They don't look modern. If that, I obviously know absolutely nothing about farming, and I don't want to sound hideously patronising, but it's old stone walls and little, obviously very old stone buildings just dotted across the hillsides. It's fantastic.
As the sun settled on another long day in this vast country, I finally spotted snowcaps cresting the rolling hills. Then, utterly exhausted from my days relaxing and sitting down, I found a place to pull in for the night.
Now, I don't really know where I am, but we've climbed significantly, and unlike this morning, it's now really quite chilly. So I'm putting on my cozy clothes, and we're going to settle in for a night of chill painting. Oh, nothing of interest. I'm just carrying on with the base colours from earlier. I'm well behind.
I was trying to keep up the momentum and positive vibes, but I really hate base coating. So trying to get through a batch of this size, simply by brute forcing my motivation, was straining me to my very limits. Sooner or later, I'd simply have to move on to something more interesting. Sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for. The night was about to become more interesting, but in a really concerning, kind of mortifying kind of way. That was the sound of Kiwi having some kind of coughing fit. To me, it was the most horrifying noise I've ever heard. They came on suddenly and continued all through the night. And into the next day as well. This morning, we've been for a walk and she's played fetch, she's eaten properly, she's even been barking obnoxiously at people. It's like she's back to her old self. So I really don't know what that was. Maybe she had some kind of ulterior motive. And I guess if that objective was to raise my blood pressure or to leave streaks of slimy phlegm all over my bedding, then mission accomplished. But otherwise, and maybe she was just trying to create content. Maybe she was really frustrated by the fact that I wasn't filming the horrifying fits, and she thought that the video needed some spice, which she'd be right. It does need. It's dragging. It's dragging. To be safe, we made a beeline for the nearest vets, but they wouldn't see her, and she seemed to be better anyway. So we simply continued south to our next stop, the mighty and strategically vital fortified city of Carcassonne. We're less than a dozen miles from Carcassonne now, and everything has suddenly been thrown into very Mediterranean relief. The trees, the shrubs, the sort of more arid tone in the ground, even the film of dust on the roads, and of course the quite classic Mediterranean orange topped roofs. Topped? Orange, what are they called? Slate. Orange slated roofs. Literally just trying to get into the car park and there's some kind of French civilian blockade in place. The blockaders eventually dispersed and I didn't want to waste a moment heading into the city. It's not just that Carcassonne is, as far as I'm aware, the only Warhammer location that simply lifted its name straight out of reality. The lore of the Warhammer version and the epic history of the real one have much in common. The real city sits in the Orge Valley, with the Pyrenees to the south and the Black Mountain country to the north and west. It is the gateway to the Mediterranean in the east. Through the Middle Ages, it was France's southern frontier, before their border was pushed down into the mountains. Even the Romans had a garrison here, and part of their fortifications form part of the City of Carcassonne's walls today. As for the fictional city, it is Bretonnia's bulwark against the orcs and goblins and the beastmen that would come up from Estalia in the south. One of the things I find so strange about this place is this isn't just a tourist attraction. It's not just a castle preserved for posterity. It's a part of the town. It functions, people live here, it's got schools in it and stuff. So inside these walls is just an ongoing part of the city, which makes the tiny, tiny little medieval thoroughfare a busy high street with lorries and vans and cars and taxis and stuff in and out. It's bizarre. Despite the surprisingly heavy traffic, the city is absolutely superb. Exactly what you'd expect from a tourist megacentre that's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But despite that, my mind was on other things. Now it may sound hyperbolic, but this is truly the best croissant coffee combination I have ever had. But I promise after this procrastination, I finally got down to some serious exploring. Whilst the entire city is protected by 2 walls with 53 towers around them, there is a citadel at the centre. It was the first ever to use hoardings in time of siege. These temporary wooden constructions that allowed the defenders to aim directly downwards at any attackers at the base of the wall. You see something similar on some of the towers, particularly these horseshoe-shaped ones. Their shape marks them out as the fortifications left behind by the Romans and amalgamated into the medieval structure. The quality with which they, and the rest of the fortress, have been preserved actually blew me away. It's staggering. Can you imagine being stationed up here on the inner wall and having to watch as the chaos unfolded on the outer ring wall, knowing that that's what's heading your way? With all the interesting, socially normal bits out of the way, I found a secluded spot at the base of the fortress to begin some painting. Giving thanks for the blessings of the lady, the base coating was finally done and we were on to the washes. I used Agract's Earthshade for the woods and Ryken Fleshshade for the skin, the gold, and the leathers. And of course, trusty old Nuln Oil for those silver metal parts. I then grabbed an early lunch from this beautiful little cafe on the main street. We were sat in this little garden that looks more like a courtyard. I thought, sitting here, there are so many thousands of little nooks and crannies to a walled city like this. Given the city itself has got such a storied history and been at the centre of so much political and military upheaval, all these little buildings and alcoves must have incredible histories of their own, involving the families who have sheltered in them through assaults and built and developed them when times were good. I think these are often the stories that are most interesting, and sadly they're the ones we never get to hear. This afternoon we head into the Pyrenees, into the mountains. I think the natural splendour factor is really about to escalate. Heading south meant more little roads, more little villages, and a dramatic escalation in scenic beauty. We were now in the Pyrenees foothills, and the Pyrenees are known for their little winding gorges where the roads run along the bottom. Whilst officially, of course, I still think that Cheddar Gorge is better, I will begrudgingly concede to the French that this was pretty good. I found another air in a little village called Le Grasse. It was nice, but it wasn't without its issues.
Yeah, when people ask me, how do you go for a poo in the van? And I'm like, don't worry, there's loads of public bathrooms if you know where to look. I'm not suggesting that's not without its risk. Someone went through something truly harrowing in there.
Things didn't necessarily improve when I got back to the van. Painting in the heat is already a difficult experience, but the inevitable spill happened just as I tried to get to grips with this project. Continuing my work on the cloaks, I moved to the insides, which I wanted to be a different colour to differentiate them from the outsides, so I made an apple white mix with cream and cyan-bright green, before getting hungry and thinking about food.
I am genuinely hyped to be going out tonight. This will be my last chance, I think, for a proper meal out for a little while at least. So I'm going to go the whole way. Meal, side, dessert, couple of drinks. Excellent. I ran into an English woman earlier who said that all the restaurants down the promenade are good, but the last one on the right is particularly good, so that's what I'm aiming for. It's either that or 2-day-old leftover pizza that's been shoved under the backseat of the van for the last 48 hours. Anyway, I thought it's quite a nice place, so I've done the best I possibly can in the circumstances to be restaurant ready. Fresh socks, fresh everything, smart casual trousers. And the closest thing I can feasibly get to a shower. Let's just hope I can sit outside. It's closed. They're all closed. I swear, I mean, look, my French isn't very good, I admit, but open every day, morning and evening, service in the evening from 1900 to 2045.
The next day we were back on the road. We'd seen some fantastic examples of well-preserved fortifications and castles, but in the old world, battle is never far away, and so as many of these fortresses would be in ruins as they would be standing. Relations between the elves and Bretonnia were typically very good, but there have been times when the Bretonians have encroached too far into the forests of Loren and paid the price.
So we're going to go and find what I think will be great inspiration for an old human fort, perhaps Bretonian, perhaps something else, that's then been reclaimed by the forest spirits and is now part of the Wood Elves' domain.
This is Chateau de Carcassonne. It is known as one of the 5 Sons of Carcassonne. It was intended to protect the frontier between France and Spain before that border was pushed further south in the 17th century. The fortress is often seen as the last Cathar stronghold. Cathars were a sect of Christianity dominant in southern Europe about 700 years ago. Whilst they were Christians, they believed there were 2 gods. They often referred to themselves as the Good Christians, which is pretty bloody passive-aggressive if you ask me. They also held Carcassonne, but were declared heretics by the papacy, and a crusade was declared against them. Carcassonne, which was commonly considered to be impregnable, did not fall to an assault, but their leader died suspiciously whilst attempting to negotiate the city's surrender. The Cathars were forced to leave the city with nothing but the shirts on their backs, and many came south. They will have holed up in fortresses like this one until the end. In a twist that won't be particularly surprising given the Pope's usual MO throughout history, many thousands were slaughtered.
It's real steep. Oh my god.
I appreciate manning a medieval fortress won't have been a cakewalk, but what a fantastic view to come with the job. I had to try and burn off some of Kiwi's energy before we headed into the fortress. Then we began our climb up toward the chateau. Now, I'm not saying that I'm massively fit, but it is a bit tiring getting to the base of the castle in shorts and a t-shirt. Imagine trying to do this with a shield and weapons and armour, under missile fire, and then having the strength to fight at the end of it. And I drove most of it. It stands just shy of 2,400 feet above sea level. At least the Wood Elves would have eagles to help them. My biggest worry was that Kiwi would drag me down these spiral stairs.
Please be good. Please be good.
Needless to say that the view at the top was pretty spectacular. Although I feel that can make things worse if you just see a threat way off in the distance that you know you can do little about. Imagine being a Bretonnian peasant, pressed into service to build a fortress at the edge of a forest you know most people never return from. You look out over the barricades at the woods below and one day you realise the trees are moving. Luckily, Bretonnians were rarely forced to take such idiotic risks, but not never. One Duke of Carcassonne, Macivort, wanted to expand his territory. Knowing he couldn't go into another Bretonnian dukedom, he went east into Loren. He ordered his peasants to start clearing the heathlands and destroying the waystones. The elves, of course, being furiously protective, and that being a dick move anyway, they were never going to let that slide. What followed is the Battle of Elfincourt, which, yes, basically is the Battle of Agincourt, but with the French heavy cavalry being replaced by the Bretonnians, and the English longbows being replaced by the mass elven bowfire. Negotiating these stairs with a dog who only has 2 speeds, full speed and no speed, was quite terrifying.
Good girl. Good girl. Go. Stay. 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 Good girl. Go. Stay. Stay. Stay.
Back at the van, I started to paint yet again, and yes, I am still doing the cloaks. It's trying to layer up those greens and realising how desperately far behind I am. It was around this point that I narrowed my ambitions and decided I would not be painting any of the woodland spirits. So the Tree Lord, the Dryads, they're all off the table. It just simply isn't practical. However, if I can get all the elves done, it'll still be a fantastic achievement. And I'm liking the way that these cloaks are coming together with a bit of blending, a bit of feathering, and quite a bit of layering, up to moot green and then a drop of yellow at the end, just to make them really pop. Soon enough though, I was defeated by the heat once again, It was getting on for 30 degrees even on top of the mountain. I decided that the next stop needed to be somewhere we could cool off. These are the enchanting pools of the Gorges de Duval. Not only are they great for paddling in, they've got a less war-crimey vibe than the castle, which really helps to elevate the mood. I needed to find somewhere to set up to paint, where the dog could do what I knew her little doggy heart had been set on since first she laid eyes on these pools. This is one of my life's most wholesome and idyllic moments. Painting in beautiful heat, my feet dangling in the water and the dog gambling around in the background. I have my fair share of regrets, but it's hard to validate them when my life choices led me to this particular moment. I got some more cloaks done, but soon enough it was time to pack up and head off to the next overnight stop, which was another couple of hours away. We're now getting deeper and deeper into the Pyrenees proper. I've got a place lined up to stay tonight, and then we'll start to head west. And as we do, the mountains will get bigger and the terrain will get more alpine, which means that the trees will get bigger, they'll get greener and they'll get denser. So it will seem more and more, I think, like we're entering the forest proper and leaving this more arid terrain behind. That's the theory, anyway. Just reached into a pocket on my camera bag where I was keeping some paints that came out with me earlier. I don't like the looks of this. I don't like the looks of this at all. I need that paint. Oh no. It's almost all gone. And this is like the central colour for all the cloaks. It's empty. How does that happen? It's empty. This is actually really bad. I don't know how I'm supposed to do the project. Oh, sugar. I'm gonna have to try and save as much as I can from inside the bag pocket. It's a really good place to keep a spare camera battery too. Also, I'm putting all of those right on my table. Another solid idea. Oh, this is really bad. I actually don't even know what colour that was originally. Oh God. Oh, good. 2 more camera batteries. So I'm going to try and look at the silver lining, look at the positive and say this is great motivation that I need to get all the cloaks done tonight. Because if I get them done, then I don't need that paint anymore. And it doesn't really matter if it dries up. If I don't get it done and the paint dries up, project done. Whilst I was cooking dinner, the motivation wall hit me and I decided that tonight could realistically mean tomorrow. So I decided to have a casual dinner, head to bed and start fresh. Imagine coming to France, food capital of the world, arguably, and eating like this. All right, I'm ready to take on this challenge. One day, all the robes completely done, but I do feel like I need a bit more inspiration to get there. You see, Bretonnia isn't just a very martial country, it's also a deeply spiritual one.
So whilst we've seen a lot of castles and fortifications, what we've not seen is how the Bretonnians might celebrate their faith. I figure it would be in any way necessary. Whatever space they have, they're going to utilise it in order to show their devotion to the lady, including carving a monastery into a sheer cliff face. So that's why we're here in the Gorges de Carcassonne, slightly further west of the pools we were just at, to get some spiritual reawakening and paint some green robes. You can imagine clerics and pilgrims feeling very isolated making this journey, like they're leaving the rest of society behind and going to be with the lady, their god, whatever.
There has been a chapel in these caves since the 15th century. It was built by Franciscan monks, and it was the Franciscans who restored it and use it today. It was beautiful and secluded. I can certainly see why it would have been inspiring to the faithful. Incidentally, it would be an epic setting for devout Bretonnians, sheltering from the fury of forest spirits they have slighted.
Christ. This was their view every day.
Behind the buildings in the chapel there was this tunnel that shot off into the cliff face. In my headcanon, it was an exciting way of escaping in case the faithful came under attack. In reality, it just led to another car park.
Yeah, okay, that does break the spell somewhat. Excuse me, dog.
So we started up, and I started driving through the gorge. These roads were absolutely terrifying. It is a sheer cliff face on the left-hand side, and the road is only about an inch or two wider than the van itself.
My God.
It was a lot of fun to drive, but I just thanked God that no vehicles were coming the other way, because there weren't many passing places. Coming out the other end, we found buildings that looked like they could have been ripped straight out of a Bretonnian novel, and then the terrain started to change.
As expected, heading west, we finally entered the forest proper. We're finally finding evidence that Athel Loren is real enough, and it sits not by the Alps, but by the Pyrenees, and it separates France from the Iberian Peninsula.
The next challenge was to find somewhere inspiring and cool to camp out and paint, and I think on this occasion, I absolutely smashed it. This is the town of Killen, whose coat of arms appears to be someone failing to pick up a 1-7-10 split whilst bowling. That's right, look it up. We went for our pre-painting traditional dog walk in which Kiwi caused problems.
No, Key, don't drop. Oh, crap, Kiwi. I'm going in. Don't drop it again.
That was advice Kiwi declined to observe.
Total asshole! See it down there. It's gone, dude. It's gone. You have to keep going. Come on, keep going, keep going. Girl, I'm sorry, dude. No, it's gone. It's gone. It's like half a mile back. Come on. I'm sorry, girl. No, come on, keep it going.
Heartbreaking. She loved that bloody puffin.
I didn't expect this at the end of this walk. Okay, we're back. One puffin short. Sorry, dude.
This was it. Last chance this evening to save the project, bash out the cloaks, and more beyond. miraculously, it worked. I worked my sweaty little socks off. For a while, that was, anyway. This is one of my favourite bits of any camping holiday. Breakfast with a view.
Down, thank you. Good girl. Go.
Whilst the dog played, I finished off the apple white of the cloaks with some edge highlighting, and I ran the darker Cyberite green into the recesses.
Hey dude.
Now spraying my white, which of course took me 20 minutes to find because I painted the pot green. With that done, we were en route again, and hopefully with no more drama. We were heading further west into the regional national park of the Pyrenees.
You always know you're getting close to your destination in France when driving the roads becomes a harrowing ordeal.
It was worth it though. France always made it worth your while. With the situation now quite desperate and with no time to waste, I packed up and headed out to find somewhere to paint.
We found a nice chill place to camp out. Dog is busy getting herself as dirty as she possibly can do. I think she's looking for her Kong, which she's dropped in a large puddle. I feel like we're going to be here for a while, don't we, dude? So I brought every single miniature I have to paint with me, all the Eternal Guard and 2 characters, and we're going to do the leathers. I could see it! I could see it, it's right there. The reason you can't see it is because you keep dirtying up the water whenever you go in to get it. It's right there! Don't make me get it. Don't make me get it. Oh no. Here! Oh my god.
With that resolved, I managed to crack on with the painting, doing the second biggest component on these models, which is the leathers, mixing Tuscarora fur with Duval brown. If I wanted to darken any areas, I'd go back over it with Reikland flesh shade, and to do the edge highlighting, I'd add a bit of white to the Tuscarora fur, trying to get a gradual transition. It was great to be back painting in a forest again. It felt like proper Wood Elf fan bait. These woods are quite boggy and pitted, so the ground is very uneven, there are streams everywhere and roots jutting out. It felt quite chaotic, which is exactly what I expect Athel Loren to be like. Of course, if I was truly a man from Albion in Loren, this is where I'd be at the greatest of perils. The elves can be reasoned with, and they do reason, but the tree spirits, the malevolent shapeshifters who take the form of the terrifying dryads, are less likely to give you a fair hearing. It feels like you can't escape the sound of water here. It's not only the number of rivers, but the fact they are all descending from such extreme elevation. There are waterfalls everywhere.
Oh, it's chilly. It is chilly. Oh my god. Woo! That's awesome. That's awesome.
I'm at the foot of some mountains that boast a series of quite famous lakes called Ltang Blanc. I intended to climb the mountain and see one. An elven lord looking to ride a great eagle into battle would need to climb the Grey Mountains to befriend one. I'm going to attempt the same ordeal. So, as I say, mountains and lakes. I think I can get both in a single hike, there's two options here, two routes. One is 4 hours and 30 minutes, and the other is 7 hours and 50 minutes. So I'm going to keep all my fingers crossed that we can get it all with the 4 hours and 30 minute one. So with a heart full of hope and some trepidation, I set off toward the mountains. This holiday's brought overcast weather, rain significant enough to get my van stuck in mud, heat so intense it becomes unworkable, and now snow. It's just impossible to pack for a holiday like this. It's actual snow, dude. I was telling her, second time ever seeing snow. This is it. This is Athel Loren. Twisted and gnarled, difficult to navigate, overgrown and old, and yet still extraordinarily beautiful. This is just it. This is it. And let's not forget, it's also at the foot of a mountain, which is where I'm going to find, okay, my great eagle. There's clearly also the abandoned hideaway of some unfortunate Bretonnian traveller who wandered too deep into the woods and presumably didn't get out again. You can't really hear what I'm saying there, but I'm lamenting the fact that the path is not only extremely steep, but covered in rock-hard snow. It was extraordinarily difficult to navigate. I stopped several times to consider whether I should continue at all. I did find what looked eerily like an elven symbol carved into the side of a tree. Just look at it, that thing is badass. After many hours and significant effort, we made it. A beautiful, isolated mountaintop lake. There, a lake and mountains. I hope you're happy. This sequence better elevate this whole project by a significant margin. Otherwise I think I'll cry. Just got to move the dried up old animal turds out the way. Hello. Come here then. How do you have energy? How do you have any energy at all? What if something actually did go wrong? If I'd fallen or gotten lost and starved to death? They would eventually have found my frozen old corpse, and they'd have opened the bag and they wouldn't have found any water, they wouldn't have found any food, they'd have found some camera equipment and some toy soldiers. I'd have been one of those idiots that just went up a mountain completely unprepared and got themselves killed, except most of them don't do it with the extra weight of a rucksack full of toy soldiers and paints. What would you think? What would you, as a French person, be like, oh, some English moron? It's not a dignified way to go. Up here I was working on the golds. You'll see that some of the leathers aren't even finished yet, but I'll be finishing those this evening. First I had to tidy them up with the base Retributor armour, which meant reapplying some of the Reichland flesh shade where I'd messed up. I didn't have long to get stuck into it though. Oh goody. It's raining. Go on, Keith. Oh, shit. That night, I knew that I'd have to make up for lost time, and I started with the leathers, finishing off all the shading and highlighting I hadn't been able to do down by the river. I also finished all of the gold, using the Liberator Gold sort of silvery gold colour to highlight it and pick out all the scales, and just generally give it a bit of definition. I then did some pretty chunky highlights with the Stormhost Silver. It was a relief to finally make progress because the next day, we were beginning the drive back north. It was a long drive, admittedly, but still, a bit alarming.
So we're now embarked on our very long journey back north, and it is really coming down, but that is good because I need to paint in a way that I haven't been doing for the rest of the holiday. There's so much to do. Just a few days to do it in, and I still have 10 hours of driving and one last visit to make.
My 800km or so drive was punctuated by frequent breaks to stop for snacks. I stopped twice overnight on the way up to plough on with the painting. Having accepted that I wasn't going to get even the Glade Guard done, I was now only working to get the Eternal Guard, Glade Captain, and Glade Lord finished by the end of the week. Remember kids, anything's possible when you lower your expectations. After painting those flower petals hot pink, I worked on the banner for the command. Not hugely original, but I wanted a big, great stag. I'm not exactly a freehanding pro, but if you want any hint at all, it's don't be afraid of the touch-ups. Endless touch-ups are your friends, just going back and forth between the browns and the greens until eventually I had a shape that worked for me. As long as your paint is thin enough that it's not going to start stacking up, there's no problem with it. Once all that was done, I could just start building up the colours toward the centre of each shape and then highlighting them. After a few lowlights on the opposite sides, it's all done. I then did the green on the background similarly to how I did the robes, and if you're wondering why I don't do the green background first, it makes the touch-ups almost impossible. And yes, that elk does have a very long snoot and stupid face. I won't deny that. At this point I'm realising that because I've got this banner and another banner, I've got to do this another 3 times. With the Glade Captain Battle Standard Bearer, I also did a sort of turquoise trim around the outside with a weird shape on it. I'm just doing things. I couldn't even tell you why. The next day we'd make our final stop of the holiday, and it was an inevitable one. If we're going to explore Bretonnian grandeur, there is one palace above all others. I'm speaking, of course, of the palace at Versailles. After another cheeky croissant, of course, my penultimate French breakfast.
Oh my god.
I was excited to see Versailles. It is world famous. Whilst it may be seen as a symbol of royalism, it is the decadence and extravagance that eventually brought the French monarchy low. It's why I sometimes find it strange that France should serve as the inspiration for Warhammer's most chivalric, royalist, religious nation. After all, the French love their republics. They've had 5 of them. England had 1 and called it a day. It is a secular nation, and it modernised its military early, allowing it to act as Europe's unquestioned hegemon. Still, there's no doubt it was also a successful monarchy, birthing as it did the Carolingian Empire in the early Middle Ages.
Is it just me, or is that eagle like, mate, don't touch me? It's not that kind of relationship.
After all of this, I was excited to see the opulence of the palace itself. The building works dulled the effect a little bit, but there's no denying the scale of this place was astronomical. Later that day we were back in Calais, and with little to see and little to do, the only thing on my mind was finishing my project. I started with the skin, which is the last component that takes up a significant amount of the model's surface area. I took this opportunity to very gently do the eyeballs, and then completely ruin it by doing the pupils. And I painted literally about 100 gems. What is it with these guys in gems? They've got them on their weapons, on their robes, even in their hair. I need to get a grip. That's just bougie behaviour. Speaking of hair, that came next. I just used whatever hair appropriate colours happened to be closest to my knuckles and then washed them and highlighted them. Then, with my final few hours slipping through my fingers, panic set in. As the last light dawned on my holiday, the question was, had I done it? Well, if by it you mean painted what I initially set out to paint, the answer is an obvious and emphatic no. However, simply by repeatedly moving the goalposts, I can now claim to have achieved something. And so began the long journey back to England. I'd survived Bretonnia and found Athel Loren. Along the way I'd painted about a quarter of what I was supposed to paint. At least I painted something. That's what matters. I painted something. This video is absolutely dedicated to my Patreons. Whilst it's always appropriate to thank them, of course, the fact they've stuck with me this year, despite the fact I've not really been uploading anything, is absolutely fantastic. I've said before it was a tumultuous year, but hopefully I'm back to uploading on a regular basis now. Patrons, if you're listening, I hope you don't think it goes unnoticed. I am blown away by your kindness and generosity. Thank you so much. It's enabled us to do this trip and to plan more trips for later in the year. Patrons now have an exclusive blog. They also get early access to the videos, and I'm about to do a big postage session getting out prizes.
Hey girls!
All my miniatures are also assigned to Patreon so we can see how well they do in battle, and that will be the same for these miniatures. There'll be a Patreon stream to assign them in due course. There's a link to the Facebook down below, and we also have a podcast now. It sounds like this.
I'm not sure you can define. You cannot define human feces as a bought package.
I'm sorry. You should. I hate to say this, but you should have anticipated the human feces rebuttal ahead of time. So there you go. Isn't that something? I'm doing it with John McCorkadale from JMax Armies Middle Earth. We have a new guest each week, and it's a sort of debate where we try to cast our pet peeves into the fire. Hence, it is called Cast It Into the Fire. And there is a link, of course, in the description. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.
Because I film like this, so I can't use the light. I can't actually look through this. I'm trying to do the white dots on the gems and it's all going wrong.